Natasha "Ghost" Rivera stepped off the military transport at Camp Thunderpeak with a single duffel bag and a custom rifle case that bore the scratches of 4 combat deployments. The Wyoming wind cut through her jacket like a blade as she surveyed the imposing concrete structures carved into the snow-capped mountainside. This was it, the Supreme Sniper Training Institute, the military's most elite long-range marksmanship program. What she didn't know was that she was walking into a system designed to eliminate people exactly like her veterans with visible disabilities, who dared to dream beyond their perceived limitations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The other candidates moved across the base with the fluid confidence of youth and privilege, their pristine gear gleaming under the harsh mountain sun. Natasha watched them unload cases filled with cutting-edge rifles worth more than most people's cars, each weapon representing the pinnacle of modern sniper technology. Her own rifle case, weathered and practical, seemed ancient by comparison. But inside lay a weapon that had saved her life more times than she could count, a custom-modified rifle that accommodated the unique challenges of shooting with a prosthetic left leg. "Look what the medical board dragged in," muttered Austin Blaze Hamilton, a cocky recruit from Texas, whose voice carried the authority of inherited military tradition. His comment drew snickers from his circle of followers, all young men who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Did someone get lost on their way to the VA hospital? Austin's crew erupted in cruel laughter. "Hey, Pegleg, you sure you didn't miss the exit for the disability clinic?" called out another recruit, his words carrying across the courtyard like poison. Natasha remained silent, her jaw set in the way that had intimidated insurgents in 3 different countries. She adjusted the strap of her rifle case and continued walking, her prosthetic leg creating a barely noticeable limp that she'd learned to minimize through years of practice. While others boasted about their equipment specifications and college ROTC achievements, she quietly observed the wind patterns dancing across the training ranges, reading the mountain thermals like a language only she understood. The Supreme Sniper Training Institute sat at an elevation of 8,500 feet, where the thin air and unpredictable mountain weather created some of the most challenging shooting conditions in North America. The facility was designed to push marksmen to their absolute limits, testing not just their accuracy, but their ability to perform under extreme environmental stress. Most candidates were fresh from advanced infantry training, their bodies unmarked by combat and their confidence intact. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the head instructor, barely acknowledged Natasha during the initial briefing. When she reached her name on the roster, she paused as if the paperwork contained an error. "Rivera, Natasha. Combat veteran, medical retirement?" Captain Walsh asked, consulting her tablet with obvious confusion. "Yes, ma'am." "Requesting reinstatement to active sniper operations," Natasha replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd called in danger close artillery strikes under enemy fire. Walsh's eyes swept over her, taking in the weathered combat boots, the prosthetic leg that was impossible to hide completely, and the obvious age gap between her and the fresh-faced recruits around her. "Right," she said, her tone suggesting Natasha was an administrative mistake that would sort itself out soon enough. What Captain Walsh didn't know was that Natasha had been one of the most lethal snipers in the 75th Ranger Regiment before an IED explosion had cost her left leg below the knee. What she couldn't see was the medal citations hidden in Natasha's personnel file, decorations for valor that included a silver star for a shot that had saved an entire convoy from ambush. The Army had medically retired her, declaring her unfit for combat operations despite her protests that she could still outshoot anyone they put in front of her. The first day's orientation painted a clear picture of the Institute's philosophy. Speed dominated everything at Camp Thunderpeak. Rapid target acquisition, lightning-fast follow-up shots, and aggressive positioning. The program's motto blazed across the main building in steel letters: "Strike first, strike fast. Everything." Natasha had learned about patience, precision, and calculated aggression seemed suddenly obsolete in this new paradigm. During equipment inspection, Gunnery Sergeant Rachel Stone, the senior range instructor, lifted Natasha's rifle case with curiosity. "Custom modifications?" she asked, noting the unusual latches and reinforced padding. "Yes, Gunny. Adaptations for my prosthetic," Natasha replied, matter-of-factly. Stone nodded without judgment, but Natasha could see the wheels turning in the instructor's mind. In a program designed for peak physical specimens, any deviation from the norm was viewed with suspicion. That evening, while organizing her gear in the barracks, Natasha overheard Austin talking to his admirers. $50 says the gimp washes out before week 2, he said with casual cruelty. "This place is for warriors, not wounded charity cases." They probably let her in to fill some diversity quota. The nicknames spread like wildfire. Peg Leg became the unofficial name that followed her everywhere. Within days, even some of the younger instructors were using it, though they had the decency to lower their voices when senior staff were present. Natasha endured every slight in absolute silence, channeling her energy into studying the mountain, weather patterns, and preparing for the qualification trials that would determine her fate. She'd spent 2 years fighting the medical board for this opportunity, undergoing countless evaluations to prove she could still perform at an elite level. She had no way of knowing that in just weeks, that same determination would be the difference between life and death for a high-value target, and that her obsolete methods would prove that sometimes experience and adaptability trump youth and technology when everything is on the line. But first, she had to survive being the outsider in a system that had already written her off. As she lay in her narrow bunk that first night, listening to the mountain wind howl outside the barracks, Natasha made a silent promise to herself. She would prove that losing a limb hadn't made her less of a soldier, it had made her a more determined one. The Supreme Sniper Training Institute was about to learn that some battles aren't won by the fastest shooter, but by the one who refuses to quit when everyone else has given up hope. The next morning arrived with the brutal efficiency of military precision. At 05:00 hours, the harsh blast of reveille shattered the mountain silence, followed immediately by the thunderous voice of Gunnery Sergeant Stone echoing through the barracks. "Rise and shine, candidates. Welcome to your first real day at the Supreme Sniper Training Institute. In exactly 30 minutes, you will be on the range for initial assessments. Those who belong here will prove it. Those who don't will be on the next transport out." Natasha was already awake, having spent the pre-dawn hours studying weather data from the base meteorological station. While her bunkmates scrambled to assemble their gear, she moved with the measured efficiency of someone who'd learned that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes got people killed. Austin Hamilton emerged from his bunk like a recruiting poster come to life, his movements fluid and confident. His rifle case bore the logo of a prestigious civilian shooting academy, and his tactical gear looked like it had been arranged by a professional photographer. He caught sight of Natasha methodically checking her prosthetic leg's attachment points and joints. "Morning, Jimp," he said loud enough for half the barracks to hear. "Hope you brought some knee pads. You're gonna be doing a lot of crawling today." His crew of followers erupted in laughter. Marcus Tank Bradley, a hulking recruit from Alabama, added his own commentary. "Maybe she can be our spotter. You know, stay low to the ground where she belongs." Natasha finished her equipment check without acknowledging the comments. She'd learned in combat that responding to provocations was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she focused on the tactical problem ahead. The initial assessment would test fundamental marksmanship skills under varying conditions, and she knew that her unconventional shooting, position necessitated by her prosthetic, would draw attention she didn't want. The walk to Frost Ridge Shooting complex revealed the true scope of the Institute's ambitions. The range stretched across a valley floor, with targets positioned at distances from 300 to 1,200 meters. Mountains rose on three sides, creating unpredictable wind patterns that could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss in seconds. The Kungju facility represented millions of dollars in advanced technology, with computerized target systems that could track bullet impact to within millimeters. Captain Walsh stood at the firing line like a general surveying a battlefield. Her reputation preceded her, a former Marine Corps sniper with confirmed kills in 2 theaters of operations. She'd built this program from the ground up, and her philosophy was ruthlessly simple. Only the best would graduate, and the best were. Defined by speed, aggression, and technological superiority. Candidates, Walsh announced, her voice cutting through the mountain air like a blade. This morning's assessment will determine your baseline capabilities. You will engage targets at 400, 600, and 800 meters. Time limits are strict. Equipment. Malfunctions are your responsibility. Excuses are not accepted. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled recruits before landing on Natasha. Some of you may require ... accommodations. Let me be clear, there are no accommodations in combat. If you cannot perform to standard, you do not belong here. The message was unmistakable. Natasha felt every eye turned toward her, some curious, others openly dismissive. She maintained her military bearing, but inside, she felt the familiar burn of determination that had carried her through Ranger School and 3 combat deployments. The candidates drew lots for shooting order. Austin pulled position 3, allowing him to observe the first 2 shooters and adjust accordingly. Natasha drew position 15 dead last, which meant shooting under maximum pressure with everyone watching. The first candidate, a young Marine named Jake Peterson, performed adequately. His shots were centered, his time respectable. The second, a Coast Guard specialist named Maria Santos, exceeded expectations with tight groups and impressive speed. Then came Austin's turn. Austin Hamilton approached the firing line like he owned it. His rifle a state-of-the-art, semi-automatic, platform worth more than most people's annual salary, came up smooth and fast. The spotting scope operators called out his impacts: hit center mass, hit upper ring, hit dead center. His time was exceptional, well under the prescribed limits. As he finished his string of fire, Austin turned toward the waiting candidates with a cocky grin. That's how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. Speed, precision, and superior equipment. One by one, the candidates demonstrated their skills. Some excelled, others struggled, but all followed the same basic pattern: rapid acquisition, quick shots, aggressive positioning. The Institute's philosophy in action. As Natasha's turn approached, she could feel the weight of expectation, or rather, the expectation of failure. She heard whispered comments from the observation area. This should be interesting. Wonder if she can even get into a proper shooting position. Bet she blames the prosthetic when she fails. Natasha blocked out the noise and focused on what mattered: wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, and the unique challenges posed by shooting with a prosthetic leg. She'd developed her own techniques over months of painful practice, learning to use her artificial limb as a stable platform while compensating for the loss of natural sensation and flexibility. When her name was called, Natasha moved to the firing line with deliberate confidence. She could feel the collective attention of instructors and candidates alike, waiting to see if the wounded veteran could perform under pressure. What they didn't understand was that she'd been performing under pressure since before most of them had graduated high school. She settled into her modified shooting position, a hybrid stance that maximized stability while accommodating her prosthetic. To untrained eyes, it looked awkward and unorthodox. To those who understood ballistics and precision shooting, it was a masterclass in adaptation and problem solving. The range officer raised his flag. Shooter ready? "Ready," Natasha replied, her voice steady as granite. "Commence firing." The first shot broke clean and true, the bullet finding its mark at 400 meters with surgical precision. The second, at 600 meters, struck dead center despite a sudden wind shift that she'd anticipated and compensated for. By the time she engaged the 800-meter target, the entire range had fallen silent, watching a demonstration of marksmanship that bordered on the supernatural. Her final shot at 800 meters was poetry in motion. Natasha read the wind like ancient text, calculating the complex mountain thermals that had confused every previous shooter. The bullet arced through the thin mountain air and struck the target. With devastating precision, a perfect bullseye that would have impressed Olympic champions. But when the range officer checked his stopwatch, his expression told a different story. "Time," he called out, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Rivera, Natasha. Outstanding marksmanship, but failure to complete within time standards. Overall assessment, inadequate for program requirements." The words hit like a physical blow. Natasha had delivered the most accurate shooting of the day. But her deliberate, methodical approach had cost her precious seconds. While Austin had blazed through his targets with acceptable accuracy and impressive speed, she had chosen precision over pace, and the program's philosophy made it clear. Which was valued more? Captain Walsh approached the firing line, her expression unreadable. "Rivera, your shooting is exceptional," she admitted reluctantly, "but this isn't a precision shooting competition. This is combat training. In the field, hesitation gets people killed. A good shot delivered too late is worthless." "Ma'am." "Respectfully," Natasha began, "in my experience, a bad shot delivered quickly gets the wrong people killed." The comment drew sharp intakes of breath from the watching candidates. No one challenged Captain Walsh's philosophy directly, especially not a washout on her first day. Walsh's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Your experience?" Walsh's voice carried the chill of mountain wind. "You mean your experience getting yourself blown up and medically retired? Perhaps that's why you're hesitant to take quick shots. Because quick decisions led to your current condition." The cruelty of the comment stunned everyone within earshot. Even Austin looked uncomfortable at the direct attack on Natasha's combat injury. But Natasha absorbed the blow without flinching, her military bearing intact despite the verbal assault. "Ma'am, my injury occurred during a convoy rescue operation where precision shooting saved 16 American lives. I stand by my methods, and I stand by mine," Walsh snapped. "Speed kills the enemy before they kill you. This assessment concludes our evaluation. You'll receive reassignment orders within 24 hours. As the range day concluded, Natasha found herself isolated from the other candidates. Her shooting had been undeniably superior, but her failure to meet time standards marked her as fundamentally unsuited for the program's demands. She walked back to the barracks alone, carrying her rifle case and the weight of another shattered dream. Austin caught up with her near the equipment shed, his usual smirk replaced by something almost resembling respect. "Look, Rivera," he said quietly, "I gotta admit, that shooting was incredible. I mean, seriously impressive stuff. But you're just too slow for this program. Maybe that worked in whatever backwater deployment you came from, but this is elite level. Training." He paused, seeming to search for words that wouldn't sound completely condescending. "The prosthetic thing, I get that it's challenging. But maybe this just isn't the right fit. There are other opportunities in the military for someone with your limitations." Natasha studied his face, seeing something unexpected there. Genuine confusion about how someone could shoot so well yet fail so completely to meet program standards. It was the first crack she'd seen in his absolute confidence in the Institute's methods. "Austin," she said carefully, "can I ask you something? When you were shooting today, what was your shot group size at 800 meters? He straightened proudly. 4 inches. Textbook accuracy for combat conditions. Mine was 1 inch, Natasha replied matter-of-factly. In worse wind conditions, shooting after you'd stirred up dust that affected visibility. Austin's expression shifted as he processed this information. But you were too slow. I was deliberate. There's a difference. That evening, official papers appeared on Natasha's bunk. Reassignment orders, effective immediately. She was being transferred to the Technical Support Division Weapons Maintenance and Equipment Calibration. No appeal process, no second chance, just a bureaucratic dismissal typed on government letterhead. Natasha sat on her narrow bunk, staring at the orders that seemed to end her military career for the second time. Perfect marksmanship scores, years of combat experience, countless hours of rehabilitation and training, all erased because she was 3 seconds too slow on an arbitrary timeline. "Hey, don't look so destroyed," Austin said, appearing at her bunk with his usual crew trailing behind. "At least now you can do something useful. Maybe you can teach our weapons tech how to properly maintain equipment. Just try not to take too long cleaning my rifle. I've got a reputation to maintain around here." The laughter from his followers stung, but Natasha folded the orders quietly and placed them in her gear bag. She'd report to Technical Sergeant Marcus Johnson in the morning, as commanded. But something inside her had crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. She might not be fast enough for their tests, but she knew something they hadn't learned yet. Speed was meaningless if you missed the only shot that would ever truly matter. In her personal journal that night, she wrote a single line that would become her creed: precision over speed. Always. The next morning, she reported to the weapons maintenance facility, a low concrete building tucked behind the main training complex. Technical Sergeant Johnson was a weathered man in his 50s who'd been maintaining military hardware since before most of the current recruits had been born. "So you're the sniper washout," Johnson said without malice, looking up from a disassembled rifle. "Heard you can shoot straight lines through mountains, just too slow for the young guns." "Yes, Sergeant." Johnson studied her with eyes that had seen everything the military had to offer. "Well, Rivera, maybe you'll learn something useful here. These high-speed, low-drag rifles they're carrying need constant attention. And between you and me," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "half these kids couldn't hit a barn if it was painted neon orange and playing marching band music." Natasha managed her first genuine smile since arriving at Camp Thunderpeak. It was the first time anyone had suggested she might have value beyond her apparent failures. As she began learning the intricate details of rifle maintenance and ballistic calibration, Natasha didn't realize that her new position would give her access to something invaluable: detailed performance records of every weapon in the program, including classified data that would soon become critically important. She was about to discover that sometimes being overlooked was the greatest tactical advantage of all. 3 weeks into her assignment at the Technical Support Division, Natasha had become virtually invisible around Camp Thunderpeak. She arrived before dawn, calibrated and maintained rifles with surgical precision, and endured the daily parade of condescending comments from sniper candidates who treated her like glorified cleaning staff. "How's our equipment janitor today?" Austin would ask whenever he dropped off his rifle, always with his entourage of admirers trailing behind. "Make sure my scope is absolutely perfect. I've got standards to maintain around here, and I can't have subpar maintenance affecting my performance." Natasha would nod wordlessly and accept his rifle, often discovering it was poorly maintained and incorrectly zeroed. She'd fix every problem without comment, returning a weapon that performed significantly better than when Austin had first received it. He never noticed the improvements, always crediting his exceptional scores to natural talent and superior training. But Natasha noticed everything. And she was building a database that would change everything at Camp Thunderpeak. The Technical Support Division occupied a sprawling facility filled with precision equipment that most civilians would never see. bore scopes that could detect microscopic imperfections in rifle barrels, ballistic computers that calculated trajectory data for dozens of different ammunition types, environmental monitoring systems that tracked wind, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure down to the smallest fluctuations. Sergeant Johnson had given her unprecedented access to all of it, partly because he trusted her competence and partly because he was curious to see what a combat veteran would discover that his regular technicians had missed. "Rivera," he said one morning, pulling up classified performance data on his secure terminal. "I want you to look at something that's been bothering me. This doesn't leave this facility, understand?" "Understood, Sergeant." Johnson's screen displayed detailed shooting analysis from the range computers, data that tracked not just hit or miss, but precision consistency, performance degradation under stress, and accuracy patterns that revealed each shooter's true capabilities under various conditions. "Look at these patterns," Johnson said, pointing to a series of graphs that showed shooting performance over time. "Really look." Natasha studied the data with growing understanding that felt like pieces of a complex puzzle clicking into place. The computer tracked every shot fired during training exercises, creating comprehensive profiles of each candidate's actual capabilities versus their official scores. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Austin Hamilton, the golden boy of the sniper program, had serious accuracy problems that his speed was masking. Under stress simulation exercises, his shot groups opened up by over 70%. When environmental conditions deviated from optimal, his performance degraded catastrophically. Several other top-ranked candidates showed similar patterns. They could shoot fast enough to impress observers during controlled demonstrations, but when precision was truly tested under realistic conditions, they failed dramatically. "Sergeant," Natasha said carefully, "some of these candidates might not be ready for real-world deployment." Johnson nodded grimly. "I've been trying to tell the instructors that for months, but speed sells, Rivera. The brass loves fast times and impressive demonstrations. They don't want to hear about precision under genuine pressure or performance degradation in adverse conditions." That evening, Natasha made a decision that would change everything at Camp Thunderpeak. Using her access to range computers and maintenance records, she began compiling a comprehensive analysis of each candidate's true capabilities. She worked deep into the night, cross-referencing ammunition performance data, rifle condition reports, and shooting statistics that told a story completely different from the official rankings. Her maintenance duties gave her unique insights that no one else possessed. When she serviced Austin's rifle, she discovered that his rapid shooting style was causing excessive wear on the bolt mechanism, leading to timing issues that affected accuracy. His trigger technique, optimized for speed, was creating inconsistent shot placement under stress. The high-tech scope he was so proud of had developed tracking problems from his aggressive handling. She documented everything with scientific precision. Marcus Tank Bradley's rifle showed signs of overpressure from his habit of using excessive force on the bolt, causing extraction problems that would prove catastrophic in combat. Another top candidate, Derek Viper Morrison, had developed a flinch response to his rifle's recoil that was destroying his long-range accuracy. Though his rapid-fire scores remained impressive, the most disturbing discovery came when she accessed historical performance data from previous graduating classes. Buried in classified files were deployment outcomes from graduates who'd gone on to real combat missions. The statistics were shocking and undeniable. Several top performers from Camp Thunderpeak had failed critical shots in actual combat situations. Some had been wounded or killed because their focus on speed over precision had failed them when everything depended on their skills. Others had caused civilian casualties due to hasty shot placement in complex urban environments. One file particularly haunted her. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, a previous program graduate who'd been killed in Afghanistan, when his rapid engagement of what he thought was an enemy position turned out to be a school building. His speed-focused training had conditioned him to shoot first and verify targets later, a mentality that had proven fatal. Natasha compiled this data into a comprehensive report she privately titled, "Velocity versus Precision, a Combat Readiness Analysis." It was detailed, devastating, and impossible to ignore. The Institute's obsession with speed was graduating marksmen who couldn't perform when lives actually depended on their skills. But as she prepared to submit her findings through proper military channels, she also knew that challenging the program's fundamental philosophy would likely end her career permanently. Captain Walsh had made it clear that dissent wasn't tolerated, and questioning the Institute's methods would be viewed as insubordination by someone who'd already been deemed unfit for the program. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Austin appeared at the Technical Support Division earlier than usual, his typical swagger replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. "Rivera," he said, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Can I ask you something? Off the record? What's on your mind, Austin?" He hesitated, clearly struggling with words. "Yesterday's exercise in the mountains. The one with the wind and elevation changes. I had some problems. Shots that should have been easy misses. My groupings were all over the place." Natasha looked up from the rifle she was cleaning. His rifle, actually, which showed clear evidence of the problems he was describing. "Mountain conditions can be challenging. The wind patterns up there are particularly complex. But you would have handled them, wouldn't you?" he asked quietly. "Those conditions, you would have made those shots." It was the first time Austin had ever suggested she might be better at something than he was. Natasha chose her words carefully. "Different techniques work better in different conditions, Austin. Speed is valuable, but sometimes the situation calls for a more deliberate approach." He nodded slowly, staring at his rifle as if seeing it for the first time. "Yeah, maybe, I just ... I never expected to struggle like that." After he left, Natasha realized that the cracks in the Institute's philosophy were becoming visible even to its star pupils. The question was whether anyone in authority would listen before those cracks became catastrophic failures. 1 month into her maintenance assignment, Natasha had assembled the most comprehensive analysis of sniper training effectiveness in the program's history. Her report, now spanning over 200 pages of detailed data and statistical analysis, painted a devastating picture of systemic failure masquerading as innovation. The breakthrough came on a cold Tuesday morning when Sergeant Johnson showed her something that changed everything she thought she knew about Camp Thunderpeak's true purpose. "Rivera, I need you to see this," Johnson said, his voice carrying an urgency she'd never heard before. He pulled up a classified file on his secure terminal, one that required his personal authorization code and biometric verification. "This is above your clearance level, but I think you need to understand what we're really dealing with here." The file contained deployment records from the past 3 years, real combat data from graduates who'd been sent to active theaters of operation. The statistics were staggering and deeply disturbing. Of the 47 graduates deployed to high-intensity combat zones, 12 had been killed in action. Not from enemy fire, but from tactical errors directly related to their training. Hasty shot placement in urban environments had resulted in civilian casualties that turned local populations against American forces. Rapid engagement of unverified targets had led to friendly fire incidents. Speed-prioritized training had created killers, not soldiers. "Jesus," Natasha whispered, scrolling through incident report after incident report. "How is this program still operational?" Johnson's expression was grim. "Because the official after-action reports don't tell this story. They blame combat stress and enemy action. The connection to training methodology is buried in classified analysis that never reaches the people making decisions about the program's future." Staff Sergeant Michael Torres's file was particularly damning. His rapid engagement protocols had led him to fire on a building that intelligence had incorrectly identified as an enemy position. Inside were 32 children attending a clandestine school. Torres had died in the subsequent attack, but not before his actions had created a propaganda victory for insurgent forces and turned an entire province against coalition operations. The worst part, Johnson continued, is that Torres was considered one of our success stories. Fastest target acquisition times in his class, exceptional scores on all speed-based evaluations. He graduated with honors. Natasha found herself thinking about her own combat deployments, where patience and precision had been the difference between successful missions and catastrophic failures. She remembered waiting for hours to take a single shot that would neutralize a high-value target, without endangering civilians. The Institute's philosophy would have condemned such patience as hesitation and failure. Sergeant, who else knows about this data? You, me, and whoever compiled these reports at division level. Captain Walsh has never seen them. They're classified above her level. The Institute operates on officially reported statistics that make the program look like an unqualified success. That afternoon, while calibrating scopes for the advanced training class, Natasha overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Austin and his crew were discussing their upcoming field exercise, a simulated urban combat scenario designed to test their rapid engagement skills. The key is speed, Austin was explaining to a group of newer candidates. In urban environments, hesitation gets you killed. You see a potential threat, you engage immediately. Better to take a questionable shot than to let the enemy get the first round off. What about civilian considerations? Asked one of the newer recruits, a young woman named Lisa Park who'd shown exceptional accuracy but struggled with speed requirements. Civilian considerations are the responsibility of intelligence and command, Austin replied dismissively. Our job is to eliminate threats as quickly as possible. Rules of engagement are for lawyers and politicians. Marcus Tank Bradley nodded. Agreement. Speed kills, and kills win wars. Everything else is just bureaucratic hand-wringing. Natasha felt sick listening to the conversation. These young soldiers were being conditioned to shoot first and analyze later, exactly the mentality that had gotten Michael Torres and his victims killed. Worse, they were proud of this approach, viewing it as professional and aggressive rather than reckless and dangerous. That evening, she worked late into the night, adding new sections to her report that detailed the connection between training, methodology, and combat failures. She cross-referenced shooting statistics with deployment outcomes, creating an undeniable pattern that linked speed-focused training to tactical disasters. Her analysis revealed something even more disturbing. The candidates with the best official scores were often the ones who performed worst under genuine combat stress. Their training had optimized them for controlled range conditions with predictable targets and artificial time pressure. When faced with complex tactical situations requiring judgment and precision, they defaulted to rapid engagement, often with catastrophic results. The Institute was producing killers who could hit targets quickly but couldn't distinguish between legitimate threats and innocent civilians. Worse, they'd been conditioned to view such distinctions as someone else's responsibility. Around midnight, as she was preparing to save her work and return to the barracks, Natasha heard footsteps outside the technical support division. She quickly minimized her files and pretended to be conducting routine maintenance as Captain Walsh entered the facility. "Working late, Rivera?" Walsh asked, her tone carrying suspicion. "Yes, ma'am. Completing calibrations for tomorrow's exercises." Walsh approached her workstation, noting the rifles arranged for maintenance and the technical manuals spread across her desk. "I trust you're focusing on your assigned duties and not overstepping your responsibilities." "Of course, ma'am." "Good, because I'd hate to discover that someone was using their position to access information beyond their authorization level. That would be grounds for immediate disciplinary action, possibly court-martial." The threat was unmistakable. Walsh suspected something, though Natasha couldn't tell how much she actually knew. After the captain left, Natasha realized her investigation was becoming dangerous. But the data she'd uncovered was too important to ignore. The next morning brought devastating confirmation of her worst fears. News arrived that another program graduate, Lieutenant James Foster, had been killed in Syria after engaging what he thought was an enemy sniper position. His rapid response had been textbook perfect according to Institute standards, and had resulted in the deaths of 3 Syrian army soldiers who were actually Allied forces operating in the same area. The friendly fire incident had been caused by exactly the kind of hasty target engagement that Camp Thunderpeak was teaching as standard operating procedure. Natasha made a decision that would change everything. She was going to take her report directly to the base commander, regardless of the personal consequences. Too many people were dying because of training that prioritized speed over judgment, aggression over precision, but first she needed allies. And she was about to discover that she wasn't the only person at Camp Thunderpeak who had serious doubts about the Institute's methods. The opportunity came sooner than Natasha expected. Brigadier General Michael Kane arrived at Camp Thunderpeak for his quarterly inspection, bringing with him a reputation for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense and getting to the truth of operational effectiveness. Unlike the ceremonial visits that focused on impressive demonstrations, Kane's inspections dug deep into actual performance data and real-world readiness. Natasha had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing her presentation. Her combat readiness analysis was now a comprehensive indictment of the Institute's training philosophy, complete with statistical evidence, historical deployment data, and tactical analysis that painted a devastating picture of systemic failure. Challenge was getting the report to someone who would actually read it and act on its findings. Her opportunity came during Kane's inspection of the Technical Support Division. Sergeant Johnson had arranged for Natasha to brief the general on equipment readiness and maintenance. Procedures are a routine part of the inspection process that no one would question. General Kane, this is Technical Specialist Rivera, Johnson sighed, introducing her as the general examined the facility's precision equipment. She's been conducting comprehensive analysis of our weapon systems and their field performance. Kane studied Natasha with the calculating gaze of someone who'd learned to assess people quickly and accurately. Technical Specialist Rivera, you have something to report? This was her moment. Natasha took a steadying breath and made the decision. That would either save lives or end her career, possibly both. Sir, I've identified serious deficiencies in our training methodology that are resulting in combat failures and unnecessary casualties. I have comprehensive data supporting my analysis. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Captain Walsh, who'd been trailing the inspection tour, stepped forward with barely controlled fury. General Kane, Specialist Rivera, is a maintenance technician who was eliminated from the sniper program for failure to meet basic standards. She has no authority to evaluate training methodology or operational effectiveness. Kane held up a hand, silencing Walsh without taking his eyes off Natasha. What kind of deficiency, Specialist? Sir, our emphasis on speed over precision is producing graduates who cannot perform effectively under realistic combat conditions. I have deployment data showing a direct correlation between our training methods and tactical failures in theater. That's enough, Walsh snapped. General, this is highly inappropriate. Specialist Rivera is overstepping her authority and making accusations based on Captain Walsh. Kane interrupted, his voice carrying unmistakable command authority. I'll determine what's appropriate. Specialist Rivera, you have 5 minutes to summarize your findings. Natasha pulled out her tablet, displaying the first slide of her presentation. Her voice was steady despite the enormity of the moment. Sir, analysis of the last 3 years shows that graduates with the highest speed-based scores have a 340% higher rate of tactical errors in combat deployment. These errors have resulted in civilian casualties, friendly fire incidents, and strategic failures that have compromised mission objectives. She clicked to the next slide, showing deployment statistics that Johnson had helped her compile. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres graduated with honors for rapid target engagement. Killed 32 children in Afghanistan due to hasty shot placement. Lieutenant James Foster, top of his class for speed-based evaluations. Caused friendly fire. Incident in Syria last month. Kane's expression grew increasingly grim as she presented case after case of program graduates whose speed-focused training had led to catastrophic failures in real combat situations. The fundamental problem, Natasha continued, is that we're training marksmen to prioritize rapid engagement over tactical judgment. In controlled range conditions, this produces impressive statistics. In complex combat environments, it produces disasters. This is absurd, Walsh interjected, her composure cracking. General, these are isolated incidents being taken out of context by someone who couldn't meet our basic performance standards. Our graduates have exceptional combat records. According to whose analysis? Kane asked sharply. Our official after-action reports show. I've read the after-action reports, Captain. I've also read the classified tactical analysis reports. That paint a very different picture. Continue, Specialist Rivera. Natasha felt a surge of validation. Kane had access to the same disturbing data she discovered. He just needed someone to connect the dots between training methodology and combat failures. Sir, the solution isn't to eliminate speed training, but to emphasize adaptive precision. Teaching marksmen when to shoot fast and when to take the careful shot that counts. Our current philosophy treats all engagements the same, regardless of tactical situation or collateral damage considerations. She displayed her final slide, showing proposed modifications to the training curriculum. We need to teach judgment alongside marksmanship. The ability to distinguish between a legitimate military target and a potential civilian. The tactical awareness to understand when rapid engagement is appropriate and when precision is literally a matter of life and death. Kane studied the presentation for a long moment, then turned to Walsh. Captain, what's your response to these findings? Walsh's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. General, Specialist Rivera is a maintenance technician who failed sniper training due to inadequate speed. Her criticism of our methods is based on her own inability to meet standards. Our program produces the finest marksmen in the military. Our program produces fast shooters, Natasha interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. Fast shooters who kill the wrong people because they've been trained to shoot first and analyze later. The confrontation had reached a breaking point. Walsh stepped toward Natasha, her voice low and dangerous. Specialist Rivera, you are speaking far beyond your authority and expertise. Your failure in this program disqualifies you from evaluating its effectiveness. My combat experience qualifies me to evaluate anything that affects soldier survival and mission success, Natasha replied, meeting Walsh's gaze without flinching. And this program is getting people killed, our people and innocent civilians. Kane raised his hand again, ending the confrontation. Captain Walsh, I want a complete review of your training methodology within 72 hours. Specialist Rivera, I want your full analysis on my desk tomorrow morning. He paused, studying both women with the expression of someone making a critical decision. I'm also ordering an immediate suspension of all advanced training exercises pending this review. If there's even a possibility that our methods are contributing to combat failures, we stop until we get it right. Walsh looked like she'd been physically struck. General, that will disrupt our entire training schedule. We have candidates graduating in 2 weeks. Then they'll graduate when I'm satisfied they're properly trained. Not just fast, Kane replied. Curtly, this inspection is concluded. As the general's party departed, Walsh turned to Natasha with fury that bordered on hatred. "You have no idea what you've just done, Rivera." No idea at all, but Natasha did know. She just challenged an entire system built on the assumption that speed was more important than judgment. The question now was whether the truth would be enough to change minds that had been made up long ago. That evening, as she prepared her complete report for General Kane, Natasha received an unexpected visitor. Austin Hamilton appeared at the Technical Support Division, but his usual swagger was nowhere to be seen. "Rivera," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Austin's transformation was remarkable and unsettling. Gone was the cocky recruit who'd mocked her prosthetic and dismissed her methods. In his place stood someone who looked genuinely troubled, carrying the weight of realizations that had shattered his confidence in everything he'd been taught. "I've been thinking about what you said," Austin began, settling into a chair across from Natasha's workstation. "About precision versus speed. About taking the shot that counts instead of just shooting fast. What's changed your mind?" Natasha asked, genuinely curious about this dramatic shift in attitude. Austin pulled out his phone, showing her a message that made her blood run cold. "My brother Marcus sent this from Afghanistan. He's a forward observer with the 82nd Airborne." The message was brief but devastating. "Lost 3 Marines yesterday to friendly fire. Sniper engaged without positive ID. Speed kills, but sometimes it kills the wrong people. Stay safe, little brother." "That sniper was a Thunderpeak graduate," Austin continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Class of 2023. Top scores in rapid engagement. Graduated with honors, just like I'm supposed to." Natasha felt a chill of recognition. This was exactly what her data had predicted. Another graduate whose speed-focused training had led to friendly fire casualties. But seeing the human impact on Austin's face made the statistics feel devastatingly real. "Austin, I'm sorry about your brother's Marines. But you understanding this problem could help prevent more incidents like that. That's why I'm here," he said, meeting her eyes with new respect. "General Kane's review, I want to help. Some of the other candidates are starting to have doubts too, especially after yesterday's urban combat simulation." "What happened in the simulation?" Austin's expression grew troubled. "Lisa Park, the recruit who's been struggling with speed requirements. She hesitated before engaging a target that looked like it might be a civilian. Captain Walsh failed her immediately for tactical hesitation, but when we reviewed the footage later, that target was marked as a non-combatant. Lisa's hesitation was correct tactical judgment, and the candidates who engaged rapidly hit the civilian target and were praised for decisive action," Austin admitted. "We're being trained to shoot first and sort out the consequences later. I never realized how dangerous that was until I started thinking about my brother and his Marines." There, conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Johnson, who looked unusually agitated. "Rivera, we've got a problem. Major problem." "What's wrong, Sergeant?" "Senator Rebecca Walsh is arriving tomorrow for an unscheduled inspection. She's Captain Walsh's sister, and she chairs the Senate Subcommittee on Military Training Effectiveness. Word is that she's here to counter General Kane's review and demonstrate that the program is performing exactly as designed." Natasha felt her stomach drop. A senatorial inspection meant political pressure that could override military judgment. If Senator Walsh was determined to protect the program, General Kane's review might be dismissed as operational interference. "With successful innovation, there's more," Johnson continued. "The senator is bringing a full media team. CNN, Fox News, Military Times. They're planning a live demonstration of our revolutionary training methods that will be broadcast nationally. It's designed to generate political support for expanding the program to other branches." Austin looked confused. "But that's good, right?" If the program works, a demonstration should prove it. The demonstration will be carefully controlled. Natasha explained. Perfect weather, optimal conditions, predetermined targets. It won't show what happens when graduates face real combat situations with complex variables and life or death consequences. Johnson nodded grimly. Captain Walsh is personally selecting the demonstration scenarios. She's not going to include urban environments, civilian considerations, or the kind of complex tactical situations where speed over precision training fails. When is this demonstration scheduled? Natasha asked. Tomorrow afternoon. The senator wants to see our most advanced candidates perform under realistic combat conditions. Austin, that means you and your team will be the primary demonstrators. Austin's face went pale. Sergeant, what if we don't perform the way Captain Walsh expects? What if we try to demonstrate more careful target identification? Then you'll be eliminated from the program for failing to follow established protocols, Johnson replied bluntly. Captain Walsh has made it clear that any deviation from speed-first methodology will be treated as insubordination. Natasha realized the impossible position Austin and the other candidates were being placed in. They were beginning to understand the flaws in their training, but they were trapped in a system that would punish them for acting on that understanding. There's something else, Johnson said, lowering his voice. I've been monitoring communications traffic. Captain Walsh has requested that you be transferred off the base before the senator's visit. She's claiming that your presence could disrupt operational readiness and that your unauthorized analysis represents a security risk. When? Natasha asked. Transport leaves at 0600 tomorrow. You'll be reassigned to a supply depot in Montana, effective immediately. The timing was no coincidence. Captain Walsh was eliminating the one person who could provide alternative analysis during the senator's visit. Without Natasha's data and perspective, the demonstration would proceed without challenge, creating political momentum that could entrench the flawed training methods permanently. Austin stood abruptly, his face set with new determination. That's not happening. Rivera's analysis could save lives, including my brother's Marines and everyone else who has to work with Thunderpeak graduates. Austin, there's nothing you can do, Natasha said. Captain Walsh has the authority to transfer me, and I can't refuse orders. Maybe you can't, Austin replied, but I can make sure your findings don't disappear. Lisa Park and I have been talking to other candidates. We're not the only ones who've started questioning the training. If we work together, maybe we can ensure that tomorrow's demonstration shows the truth instead of just the propaganda. Johnson looked skeptical. That's a career-ending move for all of you. Captain Walsh will have you court-martialed for insubordination. And if we don't act, how many more people die because we were too scared to challenge a system we know is wrong? Austin asked. My brother's Marines, foreign civilians, our own troops. At some point, doing the right thing has to matter more than following orders. Natasha stared at Austin, seeing a transformation that went far beyond attitude adjustment. The cocky recruit had become a soldier willing to sacrifice his career for principles he'd only recently discovered. It was exactly the kind of moral courage that the Institute should have been teaching alongside marksmanship. Austin, if you're serious about this, we need to be smart. Captain Walsh will be watching for any sign of dissent. Whatever we do tomorrow has to look like perfect compliance while actually demonstrating the problems with speed-first training. What did you have in mind? Natasha smiled for the first time in days. A demonstration that shows exactly what happens when speed-trained snipers face realistic conditions. We're going to give the senator and the media the truth, whether Captain Walsh likes it or not. The plan that emerged over the next few hours was audacious, dangerous, and absolutely necessary. If it worked, it would expose the Institute's flawed methodology in front of national media and political leadership. If it failed, it would end the careers of everyone involved. But sometimes, Natasha reflected, the most important battles are fought by people who have everything to lose and choose to fight anyway. Senator Rebecca Walsh arrived at Camp Thunderpeak like a political hurricane, bringing with her an entourage that included 3 camera crews, a dozen congressional staffers, and enough media attention to make or break the Institute's future. Her resemblance to Captain Walsh was unmistakable, the same sharp features, the same commanding presence, and the same absolute confidence in the superiority of aggressive tactics. Natasha watched the arrival from the Technical Support Division window, knowing that her transfer orders were already processed and that a transport would take her away from the base in just a few hours. But Austin and his growing coalition of questioning candidates had convinced her to delay her departure until after the demonstration. Officially, she was completing critical equipment calibrations. Unofficially, she was preparing for what might be the most important few hours of her military career. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Walsh announced to the assembled media at the base's main briefing facility, "Today you will witness the future of military marksmanship training. The Supreme Sniper Training Institute represents revolutionary advances in combat effectiveness, producing elite marksmen in half the traditional time while maintaining exceptional accuracy standards." The senator's opening remarks were a masterclass in political theater, emphasizing speed, efficiency, and technological superiority. She spoke of American military dominance, cost-effective training methods, and the need to prepare for modern warfare's rapid tempo. What she didn't mention were the deployment statistics that Natasha had uncovered, the friendly fire incidents, civilian casualties, and tactical failures that told a very different story. Captain Walsh stood beside her sister, radiating confidence as she prepared to demonstrate the program that had become her life's work. "Today's exercises will showcase our candidates' abilities under realistic combat conditions," she announced to the cameras. "You'll see rapid target acquisition, precision shooting under time pressure, and the kind of aggressive marksmanship that wins battles." The demonstration was scheduled to take place at Frost Ridge Shooting Complex, where carefully positioned targets in optimal weather conditions would create an impressive display of speed and accuracy. Austin and 5 other top candidates would demonstrate their skills while media cameras captured every shot for national broadcast. But the mountain weather had other plans. As the official party moved to the range, dark clouds began gathering over the peaks surrounding Camp Thunderpeak. The meteorological station reported rapidly changing conditions, temperature dropping, wind increasing, and the possibility of snow squalls that could reduce visibility dramatically. "Should we postpone?" asked one of Captain Walsh's assistants, noting the deteriorating conditions. "Absolutely not," Senator Walsh replied firmly. "Real combat doesn't wait for perfect weather. This will make the demonstration even more impressive, showing how our training prepares soldiers for adverse conditions." Natasha, monitoring weather data from the Technical Support Division, realized that the changing conditions were creating exactly the kind of complex environment where speed-first training failed catastrophically. The mountain winds were becoming unpredictable, visibility was decreasing, and temperature variations were affecting ballistic performance in ways that required careful calculation and patience. Austin approached her position during the setup phase, his face tense with determination. "Rivera, the weather's getting worse. This could be exactly what we need to demonstrate the problems with speed-first training." "It's also dangerous," Natasha warned. "If you push too hard to make a point, someone could get hurt. The media scrutiny means there's no room for error. But if we perform exactly as trained, we'll validate everything Captain Walsh claims about the program. The coverage will ensure these methods get adopted across all branches of the military." Lisa Park joined them, along with 2 other candidates who'd begun questioning the Institute's philosophy. "We've been talking," Lisa said. "We want to demonstrate adaptive precision during the exercise." Show when it's appropriate to slow down and take careful shots versus when speed is actually necessary. Captain Walsh will eliminate all of you from the program, Natasha pointed out. Maybe, Austin replied. But how many people will die if we don't act? Your data shows that this training is killing people, our people and innocent civilians. At some point, integrity has to matter more than career advancement. The first part of the demonstration proceeded exactly as Captain Walsh had planned. Under controlled conditions with predetermined targets, the candidates performed flawlessly. Their rapid engagement times were impressive, their accuracy acceptable, and their confidence obvious to all observers. Senator Walsh beamed as cameras captured displays of speed and aggression that seemed to validate every claim about the program's effectiveness. But then the weather changed everything. A sudden snow squall swept across the range, reducing visibility and creating wind patterns that turned precision shooting into a complex mathematical problem. The predetermined targets became difficult to identify clearly, and the environmental conditions demanded exactly the kind of careful analysis that speed-first training discouraged. Continue the demonstration, Captain Walsh ordered over the radio. These are exactly the conditions our training prepares candidates to handle. Austin was the first to encounter the crisis. His assigned target was barely visible through the swirling snow, and the wind patterns were unlike anything he'd experienced during controlled training exercises. His speed-focused training demanded rapid engagement, but his newfound understanding of precision shooting told him to wait, analyze, and calculate. Through her spotting scope, Natasha watched Austin struggle with the competing demands of his training and his judgment. She could see him fighting against months of conditioning that prioritized speed over careful analysis. "Candidate Hamilton, why are you hesitating?" Captain Walsh's voice crackled over the radio. "Engage the target." Immediately. Austin's finger moved toward his trigger, following the protocols he'd been drilled on countless times. But in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of taking the rapid shot his training demanded, he backed away from his rifle and keyed his radio. Target identification uncertain due to visibility conditions. Requesting permission to wait for improved conditions before engagement. The words hung in the air like an accusation. In front of national media and congressional oversight, Austin had directly challenged the Institute's core philosophy by prioritizing careful judgment over speed. Captain Walsh's response was immediate and furious. "Candidate Hamilton, you will engage that target immediately or face elimination from this program." "Ma'am, respectfully, I cannot positively identify the target as a legitimate military objective under current conditions." The standoff was being broadcast live to a national audience. Austin, the program's star candidate, was refusing to follow speed-first protocols in favor of careful target identification. It was exactly the kind of tactical judgment that Natasha's analysis had shown was critical for combat effectiveness, and exactly what the Institute's training discouraged. Senator Walsh stepped forward, her political instincts recognizing a developing crisis. "Captain, what exactly is happening here?" Before Captain Walsh could respond, Lisa Park's voice came over the radio. "Ma'am, I'm also unable to achieve positive target identification. Requesting permission to hold fire until conditions improve." Within minutes, 4 of the 6 demonstration candidates had made the same decision, prioritizing target identification over rapid engagement. The carefully choreographed demonstration was becoming an unintended indictment of speed-first training philosophy. That's when disaster struck in a way none of them had anticipated. Through the swirling snow and chaos of the failed demonstration, Natasha spotted something that made her blood freeze in her veins. A maintenance vehicle had become stranded in the impact zone, its driver apparently unaware that he'd wandered into the path of the shooting exercise. The thick snow had obscured the range boundaries, and the vehicle's occupant was now in mortal danger from any shots fired toward the target area. Worse, Through her precision spotting scope, she could see that the two candidates who hadn't joined Austin's rebellion were still preparing to engage their targets. Marcus Tank Bradley and Derek Viper Morrison, conditioned by months of speed-first training, were following their protocols exactly as taught: rapid engagement, regardless of changing conditions. Range control, we have a civilian vehicle in the impact zone, Natasha radioed immediately. Cease fire immediately. But the radio interference from the storm was creating communication problems. Her transmission was garbled by static, and the range control officer was dealing with multiple competing radio calls from the demonstration chaos. Through her scope, Natasha watched in horror as Tank Bradley acquired his target and began applying pressure to his trigger. From his position, the snow and reduced visibility meant he couldn't see the maintenance vehicle that had strayed into his line of fire. His speed-focused training demanded immediate engagement, and that's exactly what he was prepared to deliver. The maintenance worker, a civilian contractor she recognized as Pete Morrison, a local man who'd been servicing the base for over a decade, was completely unaware of the developing catastrophe. He was attempting to repair a malfunctioned target mechanism, focused entirely on his work and oblivious to the fact that high-powered rifle rounds were about to be fired in his direction. "Tank, hold fire!" Austin's voice crackled over the radio. "Civilian in the impact zone." But Bradley's radio had been damaged by the harsh conditions, and he couldn't hear the warning. Natasha watched through her scope as his finger tightened on the trigger, following the speed-first protocols that prioritized rapid engagement over situational awareness. She had perhaps 2 seconds to prevent a catastrophe that would destroy lives and validate every criticism she'd made about the Institute's training methods. The distance from her position to Bradley's rifle was over 1,300 meters through swirling snow, crosswinds that were gusting unpredictably, and visibility conditions that made precise shooting nearly impossible. It was exactly the kind of shot that the Institute's training claimed was impossible under combat conditions, a precision engagement that required patience, calculation, and absolute accuracy when speed was the only thing that mattered. Natasha's bolt-action rifle came up smooth and natural, the familiar weight settling into her shoulder like it had been designed specifically for her modified shooting stance. Through her scope, she could see Bradley's finger reaching the breaking point on his trigger. The maintenance worker was still oblivious, working calmly on the target mechanism while death approached at 2,800 feet per second. Time crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity that felt like stepping outside normal reality. Natasha's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, the world narrowing to mathematical precision that turned chaos into calculation. Wind flags at multiple distances told her a story of complex air currents. Snow density affected visibility, but also indicated barometric pressure. Temperature variations changed bullet trajectory in ways that required instant compensation. Her years of obsessive study became instinctive knowledge. The prosthetic leg that everyone had mocked became a stable shooting platform that provided unwavering support. Her journal calculations flashed through her mind like downloaded software ballistic coefficients, wind drift formulas, elevation adjustments for extreme distance shooting. She aimed not at Bradley himself, but at his rifle's bolt mechanism. A precision shot to disable his weapon without causing injury, hitting a target the size of a silver dollar at over 1,300 meters, through a snowstorm while the shooter was in motion. It was a shot that most marksmen couldn't make under perfect conditions, let alone in the middle of a blizzard with lives hanging in the balance. But Natasha had been making impossible shots her entire adult life. The trigger broke cleanly, like a piece of crystal snapping. The crack of her rifle echoed across the demonstration range, just as Bradley's weapon sparked and jerked violently in his hands. His shot went wildly off target, the bullet striking harmlessly in the snowbank 50 meters from where Pete Morrison continued his maintenance work. Still unaware of how close he'd come to death, the silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Every eye on the base turned toward the Technical Support Division, trying to understand what had just occurred. Through the swirling snow, they could see a lone figure standing at a window, rifle in hand, having just made a shot that challenged everything they thought they knew about precision marksmanship. Senator Walsh was the first to find her voice. What the hell just happened? General Kane, who'd been monitoring the demonstration from the command post, stepped forward with grim understanding. Specialist Rivera just prevented a civilian casualty by disabling a rifle at extreme range under impossible conditions. Captain Walsh stared at the distance involved, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. That shot. That distance, in these conditions, was impossible according to your training philosophy, Natasha said, her voice carrying clearly across the range as she walked toward the demonstration area. But not according to principles of adaptive precision. Bradley was examining his rifle with growing bewilderment, trying to understand why it had suddenly malfunctioned at the critical moment. The bullet had struck the bolt mechanism with surgical precision, disabling the firing system completely without causing an explosion or injury. It was the kind of accuracy that bordered on supernatural skill, exactly the kind of marksmanship that the Institute claimed was unrealistic under combat conditions. Pete Morrison finally looked up from his work, noticing the unusual activity around him. "Everything okay out here?" he called out cheerfully, completely unaware that he'd just been saved from a bullet that would have arrived before he could hear the shot that fired it. Austin reached Natasha first, his face showing a mixture of awe and vindication. "That shot," he said quietly. "At that distance, in this weather, hitting a moving target that small. Was the only shot that mattered," Natasha replied simply. Senator Walsh approached with her media entourage trailing behind, their cameras capturing every moment of a demonstration that had gone completely off script. "Specialist Rivera, I need to understand what just occurred here." "Ma'am, your sister's training philosophy nearly got an innocent man killed. Speed-first protocols prioritize rapid engagement over target identification and situational awareness. What you just witnessed was the difference between shooting fast and shooting right." The words hung in the air like an indictment of everything the Institute represented. Before them lay undeniable proof that precision under pressure was not only possible but essential, that sometimes the most important shot was the one that prevented tragedy rather than caused it. General Kane stepped forward, his expression grim but resolute. "Senator Walsh, I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about the effectiveness of this training program. The revolution at Camp Thunderpeak had begun with a single impossible shot that proved everything Natasha had been trying to tell them. Sometimes being slow, careful, and precise wasn't a weakness. It was the only thing standing between life and death. The investigation that followed lasted 6 intense days and turned Camp Thunderpeak completely upside down. Senator Walsh, faced with undeniable evidence that her sister's program had nearly caused a civilian death on live television, ordered an immediate and comprehensive review of the entire training methodology. General Kane, now armed with irrefutable proof of the system's flaws, took personal control of the investigation. In the base conference room, Natasha's combat readiness analysis was finally receiving the serious attention it deserved. Her 200 pages of data, statistical analysis, and deployment records covered every wall, creating a comprehensive indictment of speed-first training that could no longer be dismissed or ignored. "These findings are deeply disturbing, Senator," Walsh said, studying the documentation with the focused intensity of someone whose political career might depend on understanding the truth. "Specialist Rivera, walk me through your complete analysis." Natasha stood at the front of the room, facing the same officials who had been celebrating the program's speed-focused methods just days earlier. Captain Walsh sat in the back corner, her expression carefully controlled, but her career hanging in the balance of what would be revealed. "Ma'am, the fundamental issue is that we've been training for artificial conditions that don't exist in real combat," Natasha began, her voice steady and confident. "Range performance under arbitrary time limits doesn't translate to combat effectiveness when actual lives are at stake." She clicked through her presentation methodically, showing historical data from previous graduating classes. These charts demonstrate a clear correlation between speed-focused training and combat mission failures. Graduates who excelled in timed exercises struggled significantly when facing real-world scenarios that required precision under genuine life-or-death pressure. The statistics were damning and impossible to refute. Friendly fire incidents, civilian casualties, and tactical failures all directly traceable to training that prioritized rapid engagement over careful judgment. Austin Hamilton, now sitting in the front row with his damaged confidence completely rebuilt around new principles, raised his hand. "Ma'am, I was one of the program's top performers under the old system. But when I tried to apply that training under realistic conditions, I nearly killed innocent people. The speed-first approach doesn't teach judgment, it teaches reaction, without consideration." Senator Walsh leaned forward with interest. "What specifically changed your perspective, Candidate Hamilton?" "My brother's unit in Afghanistan lost 3 Marines to friendly fire caused by a Thunderpeak graduate who engaged without positive target identification. The shooter was following his training perfectly rapid engagement of potential threats. But that training never taught him when not to shoot." Lisa Park stood up from her seat, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd found her courage. "Ma'am, during our urban combat simulations, I was failed for hesitating before engaging a target that turned out to be marked as a civilian. The training punished correct tactical judgment and rewarded hasty decisions that would have resulted in unnecessary deaths." General Kane nodded grimly. "The pattern is clear and consistent. We've been optimizing for test performance rather than mission effectiveness. The question now is how we fix a system that's been producing dangerous graduates for years." Natasha turned to the next section of her presentation, showing her proposed modifications to the training curriculum. "Sir, the solution isn't to eliminate speed training, but to emphasize adaptive precision. Teaching marksmen when to shoot fast and when to take the careful shot that counts. The current philosophy treats all engagements identically, regardless of tactical situation or collateral damage considerations." She displayed detailed training modifications that incorporated judgment scenarios, complex target identification, and stress conditions that required careful analysis rather than automatic responses. "We need to teach tactical wisdom alongside marksmanship skills, the ability to distinguish between legitimate military targets and potential civilians, the combat awareness to understand when rapid engagement is appropriate and when precision is literally a matter of life and death." Captain Walsh finally spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled desperation. "Senator, these recommendations would fundamentally alter training that has been successful for years. Our graduates have exceptional performance records." "Exceptional at what?" Senator Walsh interrupted sharply. "Getting our own people killed, causing civilian casualties that turn local populations against American forces, creating international incidents that damage our strategic objectives." She stood and addressed the entire room with unmistakable political authority. "I've reviewed the classified deployment records that were kept from this program's oversight. The friendly fire incidents, the civilian casualties, the tactical failures, they paint a picture of systematic dysfunction masquerading as innovation." General Kane stepped forward. "Senator, I'm recommending immediate implementation of Specialist Rivera's training modifications across all branches. Additionally, I'm recommending that Specialist Rivera be reinstated to active duty and placed in charge of developing the new curriculum." The announcement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Natasha felt her knees weaken slightly, but she maintained her military composure. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but I want to ensure this is based on merit, not sympathy for my situation." "Specialist." "Rivera," the general replied. "3 days ago you made an impossible shot under extreme conditions to prevent a civilian casualty. That shot demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptive precision we need our marksmen to possess consistently. Your analysis has potentially saved hundreds of lives by identifying and correcting systematic training flaws. This recommendation is based entirely on proven competence." Austin approached her after the meeting, his transformation from antagonist to ally now complete. "Rivera, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my career, maybe my life, and definitely the lives of people I would have endangered with the old training. You don't owe me anything, Austin. You earned your place here by being willing to learn and change. That takes more courage than most people realize." Senator Walsh requested a private meeting with Natasha after the official proceedings concluded. "Specialist Rivera, I need to understand something. My sister built this program with genuine intentions to improve military effectiveness. How did it go so wrong?" Natasha chose her words carefully. "Ma'am, Captain Walsh wanted to create better soldiers, but she confused looking impressive with being effective. Speed is easy to measure and impressive to observe. Judgment is harder to quantify, but infinitely more important in real combat situations. And you believe your modifications will address these problems?" "I believe training should prepare soldiers for the complexity of real combat, not just the simplicity of range exercises. That means teaching them when to shoot quickly and when to take the time needed to be absolutely right." That evening, as the sun set behind the Wyoming peaks, Natasha found herself back on the range where her dreams had seemingly ended months earlier. But everything was fundamentally different now. Tomorrow, she would begin implementing training modifications that emphasized judgment over reaction, precision over speed, and tactical wisdom over rapid response. She pulled out her worn journal, the same leather-bound book that had been mocked and dismissed when she'd first arrived at Camp Thunderpeak. Its pages were now filled with the foundation of a revolutionary approach to military training that would save lives around the world. On the final page, she wrote a single entry: "Sometimes the slowest person in the room is the only one who sees. What really matters, speed is a tool. Precision is a principle. And when lives hang in the balance, principles always win." A soft footstep behind her announced someone's approach. Sergeant Johnson walked up carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing her the package. Inside was a brass nameplate: "Chief Instructor Natasha Rivera, Adaptive Precision Training Division." "You changed everything here, Rivera. Not just the program, but the people. That's worth remembering." The woman they'd called too slow, too broken, too precise had just revolutionized how the military would train its most elite marksmen. Sometimes the most important victories don't announce themselves with fanfare. They whisper their truth in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between breathing in and letting go, in that perfect moment when everything aligns and the only shot that matters finds its mark. 6 months later, Chief Instructor Natasha Rivera stood at the same firing line where her dreams had seemingly died, but everything was fundamentally different now. The mountain wind still cut through her jacket, the Wyoming peaks still dominated the horizon, but the Supreme Sniper Training Institute had been completely transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the program's original designers. "Candidates, you have as much time as you need for each engagement," came the announcement over the loudspeaker. "Your evaluation will be based on tactical judgment, precision under stress, and adaptive decision-making. Speed is valuable, but accuracy and wisdom are essential." Natasha smiled as she watched the new class of candidates approach their stations. Among them was Austin Hamilton, who had requested to repeat the program under the new curriculum after his previous training. had been deemed insufficient for real-world deployment. His cocky swagger had been replaced by focused determination, and his equipment now included a detailed notebook similar to Natasha's, filled with wind data, ballistic calculations, and tactical observations that emphasized judgment over reaction. "Chief Instructor Rivera," Austin said as he passed her position, "thank you for the environmental analysis on today's conditions. The wind patterns are particularly complex." "You're welcome, Austin. Remember, read the conditions, trust your training, and take the shot that serves the mission, not your ego." The transformation hadn't been easy or universally welcomed. Some old-school instructors had resisted the changes, and several candidates had washed out when faced with standards that valued judgment over speed. But the results spoke for themselves with stunning clarity. Recent graduates were performing significantly better in advanced training and real combat deployments. Friendly fire incidents among Thunderpeak graduates had dropped to zero. Civilian casualties caused by hasty target engagement had been eliminated entirely. Most importantly, tactical success rates had improved dramatically as soldiers learned to distinguish between situations that required rapid response and those that demanded careful precision. Colonel Kane, now permanently assigned to oversee the revolutionary training program, approached Natasha's observation post. "How are they progressing, Chief?" "Better every day, sir. They're learning to think strategically instead of just react automatically." The new program, officially renamed the Adaptive Precision Marksman Course, had become a model for military training programs worldwide. Natasha's combat readiness analysis had been published in defense journals, and her methods were being studied at military academies globally. Delegations from allied nations regularly visited Camp Thunderpeak to observe training that emphasized tactical wisdom alongside marksmanship skills. But for Natasha, the real victory was much simpler and more personal. She watched a young female candidate named Sarah Martinez methodically work through a complex shooting problem, taking her time to calculate wind drift and identify her target with absolute certainty before delivering a perfect shot at 1,200 meters. 6 months ago, Martinez would have been failed for taking too long. Today, she was praised for her precision and tactical thinking. "Time doesn't matter if you miss the only shot that counts," Natasha had told her students that morning. It had become the unofficial motto of the new program, replacing the old strike first, strike fast philosophy that had caused so much damage. As the exercise concluded, Natasha noticed something that made her heart swell with quiet pride. On the barracks wall, where "Strike First, Strike Fast" had once been painted in steel letters, there was now a new motto: "Right shot, right time, every time." Austin Hamilton approached her after securing his rifle, his notebook as thick as Natasha's now, filled with the same meticulous observations she'd been making for years. "Chief Instructor Rivera, I want you to know that your method saved my life last month." "How so, Austin?" "Deployment exercise in urban terrain. I had what looked like a clear shot on a potential insurgent, but something felt wrong. Instead of taking the rapid engagement my old training would have demanded, I waited and observed. Turned out to be a 12-year-old boy carrying a toy rifle." Natasha nodded with understanding. "And under the old training, I would have fired immediately and killed an innocent child. Your emphasis on target identification and tactical patience literally prevented a tragedy that would have haunted me forever." General Kane had returned to Camp Thunderpeak that week for a comprehensive follow-up inspection. The transformation he witnessed exceeded all expectations. The new graduates weren't just better shooters, they were better soldiers, capable of making life-and-death decisions under pressure with the kind of judgment that couldn't be rushed or artificially created. "Chief Instructor Rivera," the general said during the closing ceremony, "your work here has implications far beyond marksman training. You've demonstrated that sometimes our biggest failures reveal our most important truths." Natasha stood at attention, but inside she felt the quiet satisfaction of complete vindication. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the deep, lasting satisfaction of knowing she'd been right when it mattered most. That evening, as the sun set behind the Montana peaks, Natasha found herself alone on the range one final time. She'd been offered a promotion and transfer to the Pentagon to help implement the new training standards across all military branches. Tomorrow she would leave Camp Thunderpeak for Washington, carrying with her the methods that would reshape how America trained its warriors. She pulled out her notebook, the same worn leather-bound book that had been mocked and dismissed when she'd first arrived. Its pages were now filled with the foundation of a revolutionary approach to military training that would save lives around the world. On the final page, she wrote her last entry from Camp Thunderpeak. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Sometimes the one who moves too slowly is the only one moving in the right direction. And sometimes, just sometimes, being different isn't a weakness, it's the very strength the world has been waiting for. A soft footstep behind her announced a familiar presence. Pete Morrison, the maintenance worker whose life she'd saved during that chaotic demonstration 6 months ago, approached carrying a small gift wrapped in simple brown paper. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you again. Not just for that shot, but for changing this place into something that actually protects people, instead of just training them to kill quickly." Inside the package was a small brass plaque, engraved with a simple message: "To the woman who proved that the right shot at the right time is worth more than 1,000 fast misses." As Natasha walked back toward the barracks for the last time, she passed the memorial wall where the names of fallen marksmen were engraved in black granite. She paused, thinking of all the lives that would be saved by soldiers trained to value precision over speed, judgment over reaction. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Chief Instructor Rivera, this is Captain Lisa Park, recently deployed to Syria. Used your adaptive precision methods to resolve a hostage situation yesterday. Took my time, identified the threat precisely, and saved 6 civilians without friendly casualties. Thank you for teaching me that patience under fire isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Natasha smiled and put the phone away. She'd been called a clerical error in boots, a broken soldier with delusions, a maintenance worker who didn't understand real combat. They'd all been wrong about what those labels meant. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Sometimes the one who moves deliberately in a fast world is the only one moving in the right direction. And sometimes, just sometimes, being different isn't a weakness. It's the very strength the world has been waiting for. The range would remember her long after she was gone. But more importantly, every marksman trained in her methods would carry a piece of her wisdom forward. That rushing to the finish line means nothing if you're running in the wrong direction, and that the courage to slow down when everyone else is rushing ahead might just be the bravest thing of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.